We're going to begin. Good morning, everybody. I'm Eileen Ullman. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at JCC Chicago. And I've had the pleasure of welcoming many of you already to our talks on and our tours of Frank Lloyd Wright spaces. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the tour of Muirhead Farmhouse. And what's really exciting is that today we're joined by Michael Petersdorf, and Michael and his family actually live in Muirhead Farmhouse. So we were just talking about how hard it is to live and be the conservator of the house that you're living in. Michael, welcome. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad to be here and welcome everybody. This picture that you see on the screen, our grass unfortunately does not look this green right now. It has been really, really dry here. And so I'm glad that this picture was taken before this season. But the Muirhead Farmhouse has been, as Eileen mentioned, we are living in the house and have been ever since we did the renovation. The house has gone through kind of a storied history, and I'll kind of go through with you some of that history. But the house has actually been in my wife's family since it was constructed in 1951. So there's always been some vestige of the family living in the house ever since it was constructed, and we continue to do that now. So let's get started here. The construction period was 1951 to 1953, and it is an example of Wright's Usonian architecture, if you are familiar with some of his styles. He designed, just a little bit on Frank Lloyd Wright, he designed more than 1,000 structures. So he was a very prolific architect. Only about 532 were actually built, and I think there's about 400 plus that are still standing to this day. In 1991, he was recognized as America's greatest architect, and continues to hold that title, is my understanding. And his early works, things that were in Oak Park and River Forest and some of the early periods of areas of Chicago, those were his prairie style homes, and that eventually evolved into the Usonian design, which this house is one of those. He was about 83 years old when he designed the Muirhead Farmhouse. So for a period of time when most architects would have already been in retirement, he was still designing many residential structures and even some commercial structures. At the time that he was designing this house, I think he had about 20, my understanding is about 20 homes listed in his encyclopedia that he was working on at the time. It was just one of many residential and commercial designs that he was working on at the time. So for an 83-year-old, that's pretty good to have 20 commissions in the works. And a lot of people ask me if he ever came here and we ever met him. My father-in-law, who was the oldest of the Muirhead children, actually met him and worked with him several times. He only came to the house one time, is my understanding, and that was to site the house on the property. So he kind of came here unannounced one day. My father-in-law was the only one here, and he was a teenager. He was working on the farm, grinding some grain for feed. And the way the story goes, Wright came down the driveway in his red Lincoln Zephyr, big dust cloud behind him, and pulled up next to the old farmhouse and got out some flag stakes from his trunk and proceeded to pound those into the ground in a straight line in what was the old apple orchard at the time. There were about 100 apple trees in the orchard, and he had sited the house right down the middle of the apple orchard. And my father-in-law, by the time he'd shut down the tractor and come over to meet Wright, he said, well, my folks aren't here. They're in town doing their shopping. And Wright said, that's okay. Just let them know this is where the house is going to go. And he got back in his car and he left. And that was the only time that he was ever here. And Mr. and Mrs. Muirhead, of course, were out doing their chores or shopping chores. They came back later on in the afternoon and saw the stakes in the orchard and questioned my father-in-law at dinner time what project he had been working on in the orchard. And he said, oh, I forgot to tell you, Mr. Wright was here. He wanted me to let you know that's where the house is going to go. And I think there was a dead silence because they were kind of perplexed, one, that Wright just showed up unannounced, but also why he had chosen to put the house in the middle of what was a very mature apple orchard. So they never did contest it. They actually removed enough trees to make room for the house, and construction began. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Muirhead were some interesting people, basically.
Mike, we can't hear you.
Taking up farming. The family had owned the farm since about 1863.
Mike,
Yeah,
we're
I think I
losing,
just got a note.
we lost your sound. So can
Okay.
you repeat what you were
Am I
talking
back now
about?
or no?
Now you're back. Can you tell us about the
Okay.
Muirheads and why they were interesting?
Well, Mr. Muirhead and Mr. and Mrs. Muirhead had 5 children, basically ages 1 to 14, at the time that they commissioned this house. And Mr. Muirhead was trained as a mechanical engineer. He went to the University of Wisconsin, and the job opportunities at the onset of the Depression were pretty limited. And so he ended up coming back and taking up farming, and he was very successful at it. But his interest in architecture and mechanics, and especially drawing, I think kind of led him to Wright's work. He was also very well read. At the time in 1950, they had mentioned in one of the letters that they had 20 different magazine subscriptions. And so he had read about Wright's work in Life magazine and Architectural Digest and other magazines. And so he was kind of drawn to the architecture. When they were looking to build a new house, they actually checked out a couple of local architects, but were unsuccessful in really getting anybody interested to come out to the farm to design a new house. So Wright was the chosen architect. This is a picture, if you can see that, of the old farmhouse that's here. This was, I think, around 1870s vintage. Can you still hear me okay, Eileen?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, just making sure. And this was built, typical 2-story white farmhouse, but it was ill-suited to a family of 7. It didn't have enough bedrooms. 2 or 3 of the girls sharing one bedroom, and but it was something that he wanted to modernize, and something that he wanted something better suited for the family. It was interesting, being a mechanical engineer, he was one of the first houses in the entire area here to actually have running water in the house, and he had wired it for electricity himself. So he was a little progressive in that regard. Now, they made a wish list for the new house. They actually sat and talked with one another for a while, and actually produced what was a 6-page letter that they sent off to Wright. Now, the way that this kind of began is when he was interested in Wright's architecture and kind of had decided that he was going to pursue Wright, he packed the kids in the car one day on a Sunday and said, "We're going to go for a drive." He didn't tell them where. He just said, "We're going to go for a drive." Well, they ended up at Taliesin in Spring Green, Wisconsin. And the purpose of the trip really was to get Elizabeth a little bit more enthusiastic about the possibility of Wright designing them a new home. And what better way to do that than to show them Taliesin? So they were just going to drive around Taliesin. They had no plans to go in, but when they were driving by the main entrance, which is a gated entrance, the gates were open. So Mr. Muirhead took a chance and drove right up to the front of the house and parked. And there was a fellow standing outside the house that greeted them and asked them what they were doing there. And that turned out to be Eugene Masslink, who was Wright's personal secretary at the time. And they told him why they had made the trip, and he, Masslink invited them inside to the drawing room where Wright was sitting, so they could tell him their story and talk to him directly. And so they had a meeting with him that day, and his instructions were to go home and write him a letter letting him know what they would want in a new house. And that's what they did. They drafted a 6-page letter. And this is the first page of the letter, dated October 14th, 1948. And it basically starts to outline what it is that they were looking for in a new house. And they went through in great detail and often even sent a subsequent second 4-page letter with some more thoughts to him. But they hadn't heard anything in a long time. It had been several months, and they hadn't, all they were getting was acknowledgments that the letters had been received. but no discussions about the house or the requests or blueprints or anything. And so Mr. Muirhead would write another letter and another letter and another letter, and he would get very little to no response back. One day a letter did show up. Oh, whoops, let me back up here a little bit. Before I get too far into that, I apologize. Some of the things that were in the letter that they had asked for, they wanted a stone or brick constructed house. They wanted 5 bedrooms, 1 for each of the children if they could afford it. They wanted a dining room separate from the living room. A living room that seats up to 12 people. And then they wanted room for a record player, records, a television, and of all things, they requested a roll-up movie screen in the house if possible. I thought that was kind of an interesting request. Mrs. Muirhead wanted a large kitchen with floor-to-ceiling windows and cupboards, and also windows to bring in plenty of light and be able to look out in the yard. And then Mr. Muirhead wanted a small room for a business office that was adjacent to the front entrance of the house. So some interesting requests, things that they didn't have in the old house that they wanted in the new house. Their budget that they established was $24,000 plus architect fees. To give you kind of perspective, I think in 1950 or 1948, a brand new ranch style house would cost you about $6,000 or $7,000. So they had upped their budget simply because he was a famous architect. But they were always worried that that wasn't enough to be able to get him interested in the project. This is an aerial photo of the farm taken in about 1975, I believe. So you can see some of the barn buildings here, and also the Usonian after it was built right here among the trees. The circled area over here, the red round circle area, is actually where the Muirheads thought the house would be a good place for the house. This was their chosen spot right by the pond here. And Mr. Muirhead or Mr. Wright actually sited it over here, which, you know, there were just a few. I think this tree here is probably the only apple tree left, but this was all a huge mature apple orchard. So they had to, like I say, carve out and take down many of the apple trees in order to make room for the house. But that's the way it's situated here, and it faces southeast basically. So it actually is a well positioned in terms of taking advantage of the sun in the summertime and wintertime. Now, like I say, the initial 6-page letter went off in October of 1948. The blueprints for the house actually weren't dated until February of 1950. So it was about a 2-year wait to get something from Wright. And the construction wasn't started until the following spring. I think they actually started construction as soon as they could. Mr. Muirhead was really getting impatient with Wright throughout this process, this 2-year process, and he used numerous what I call hooks to try to speed up the process. I mean, he was familiar with the fact that Wright oftentimes took a long time to draft blueprints for his clients, but Mr. Muirhead was determined to try to speed up that process. And so one of the letters that he sent off was basically, I just hired a new man to help with the dairy operation. And so it would free up my time to start working on the house. And Mr. Wright, I guess, didn't really bite on that at all. He also sent a subsequent letter off explaining that he had just met a fellow that was in the concrete industry and he'd get a good deal and a good price on concrete. So if they were to start the house this spring, they could save a lot of money. And Mr. Wright never bought onto that one either. So as I said before, they would write letter after letter and they would send it off to him, and they would get little to no response back. But every now and then they would get a letter and it would look something like this. So if you guys can read that, I'll give you a minute. It's not a lot of text on there, but basically what it says is, Dear Mr. and Mrs. Muirhead, your patience will not go unrewarded. Sincerely, Frank Lloyd Wright. And that was it. And if you look at the date on that, it was Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's. I don't have your plans ready, but here you go. So, I call this kind of form letter B. It's the notation I've given it, because I think, you know, being that he was a busy architect and had lots of commissions going on and had lots of apprentices to deal with and trying to teach at the time, I think, you know, I can imagine Eugene Massling coming into the drawing room and telling Wright, I got another letter from the Muirheads. What do you want me to tell them? Send them form letter B. And this is form letter B. Your patience will not go unrewarded. So it was just a stall tactic, but I guess it served its purpose. This is kind of shows you the general layout of the home to kind of give you an idea of the blueprint or the floor plan. It is a long house. It is about 176 feet long from end to end. So it stretches like the prairie and everything low. It is low to the ground and it is stretched out on the property. And it is all one level. There is no basement. There is no attic. There is no garage. So it is basically a very minimal in terms of storage space, but about 3,200 square feet, and it was built on a 4x4 grid system, as you can see the little squares here. In this end of the house, you have the workshop. He labels it the garage, but it was never used as a garage. There is an overhead garage door, 8-foot garage door that goes up. Mr. Muirhead could bring some of his small tractors and machinery, farm machinery in, and he could service those in the workshop if he needed to. He did get a little space that Wright carved out for an office. This is the main entrance of the home right here where it says entry. So when you walk into the home, you can either go into the workshop area, or you can start to walk down the hall and go into the kitchen, which is a nice big farm kitchen. There is a big pantry in the home with floor to ceiling shelves, so you can store a lot of items here. Mrs. Muirhead was adamant about having a lot of storage space for bulk onions and potatoes and other things that she would buy in bulk. And so the pantry was a way to house those. There's a small washroom here just to wash your hands. There's a fireplace, one of 4 in the home. And then the dining room, which is a pretty good sized dining room with window walls all on this side. So I'm actually sitting in the dining room looking out at this window wall. I'm actually sitting at the table right here looking out this way. So it's a nice room to sit in. As you go down the gallery here, basically then it empties into what is the living room. And then what he calls the workroom is basically our laundry room. So you have the master bedroom, the master bath, the living room on this side. And again, this whole wall here is all windows. So it's a lot of open window space. And then there's the bedroom wing down at this end down here. It does house 5 bedrooms. So they did get each a bedroom for each of the children, although they are really, really tiny little bedrooms, as you can imagine, just to save on their budget. There is a bathroom here to be shared by the children, and then 5 itty bitty bedrooms. So any questions on that at all, or any comments? No?
I haven't
Okay.
received any. Some people are having trouble with the sound. I'm hearing you pretty well.
Okay.
You know,
I will talk as loud as I can.
I don't think it's so much the loudness. I think it's just that there's some echo.
Oh, well, I think part of that is the house, because there is so much brick and concrete in this house. There's no real soft surfaces. So I think that probably is where the echo is coming from.
I had a question if I could.
Yeah.
This is a standard floor plan, and I'm not an architect, but the darker black lines in that drawing, do they indicate a load-bearing wall, or is it brick, or what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, both of those actually. This in the dining area here, this is all load-bearing wall, and it is brick. All of the interior walls, with the exception of the bedroom partitions here, which are wood walls, all the rest of these are solid brick, inside and out.
So the dark lines in the drawing, that's not necessarily indicating what you've said there. I just want to understand what the dark lines in the drawing mean.
You know, I don't really know what the indicator of that is, because these here are windows along the gallery, and these are doors along the gallery. I'm trying to think. This wall here,
just curious.
Yeah. This wall here would be actually load bearing as well, but it's not dark, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, it was a slightly obscure question. Thank you.
That's okay. That's all right. So, okay. The construction period for the house was 1951 to 1953, as we talked about. And Mr. Muirhead was really good about saving much of the original paperwork and receipts, construction receipts, and so on. And so we have a lot of information on the original building where some of the supplies came from and how much, it cost them. The estimated, when Wright built the home, the plans were sent off to an engineering firm to be assessed, and the engineering firm came back and said it's going to cost $70,000 to build it as drawn. So their little budget of $24,000 was becoming somewhat difficult in light of an estimated construction cost of $70,000. Mr. Muirhead ended up jumping in and doing a lot of the work himself, which helped save quite a bit. But based on the receipts and family information that we've been able to gather, it still ended up costing them about $50,000 to $55,000 to build the house in 1951, double what they had actually budgeted for. Now that, if you talk to many of the Wright homeowners, original homeowners, they would give you pretty much the same story, that Wright never adhered to budgets. So, but these are some of the pictures during the construction period in 1951. You see the old farmhouse, the white farmhouse in the background, while they were constructing the new house here. And it's interesting, the brick piles and a lot of the stone and brick that they brought out, they would just bring out in dump trucks and just dump piles on the property. They weren't stacked in pallets or anything. It was just brick piles. More construction photos here. And the masonry of choice was Chicago common brick. So the interior walls and the exterior walls are all built out of Chicago common brick. The wood that Wright chose for the house was one of his favorites, and that was red tidewater cypress, or what they call old growth cypress. The home has concrete flooring throughout its entire interior. It's a red concrete flooring, and there are 2-inch steel pipes, as you can see in this picture up here. They put in these pipes to provide radiant hot water heat to the floor. We still use that heating system to this day, although the boilers and other regulatory equipment has been updated. And the house has a flat roof, or I call it more of a bowl. It's not really a flat roof because there is a parapet side, basically a 3-foot side that goes all the way around the, you see these stanchions over here on the roof. They would put boards on these and basically build a wall up about 3 feet all the way around the flat roof. So it's actually more like a bowl than it is a flat roof, and it is one of our heaviest maintenance areas of the home. I'm up there probably 3 or 4 times every year to either shovel snow off or to vacuum pine leaves and needles, the occasional dead squirrel, whatever happens to get up on the roof. And so it's a constant maintenance issue. Some of the architectural features of the home, if you actually come to visit at some point, you'll notice the brickwork is probably one of the first things that you'll notice. The brick in the house, as I say, this is an interior wall along the hallway. And you'll notice that the head joints, these little joints in between each of the individual bricks, Wright specified that they be filled in with colored mortar, mortar that would match the color of the brick. The brick is kind of a pinkish red color. And this had to be done by hand after the bricks were laid. So they would build this wall and wait a couple of weeks, and they would come back with small batches of colored mortar that they would mix up, and they would trowel that into these little spaces. This creates more of a horizontal layering look than it does an individual cobblestone look. Wright was pretty specific about that. If you look at this picture, the one in the middle here, you'll notice that the mortar joint is cut at an angle. That was something that Wright specified as well, needed to be done. And I'm sure the masons just hated this, but they had to actually take a trowel and actually cut this angle this mortar at an angle. Wright wanted this angle here, 90-degree angle at a slight angle, if you can understand what I'm referring to here. He's very specific in his drawings about that. And you also notice that any place where a wood cabinet or wood shelf meets the brick wall, they actually took a scroll saw or a coping saw and actually cut the brick to match cut the wood to match the profile of the brick. So it's another little detail in the home that you'll see, things that they wouldn't do these days. Nowadays, they would probably just straight cut this piece of wood and then fill it in with a caulk joint. But Wright was pretty specific about the wood being actually carved into this brick inlay. And then the last picture on the right shows the mitered glass windows. One of his architectural features. Everything from Taliesin to most of the Usonians will have at least one of these windows. There actually was 4 of them in this house. And these are just the pieces, the edges of the glass, the 1/4-inch plate glass were cut at a 45-degree angle, and then they were just fitted together. So it's not the most weather-tight window system, but it does eliminate that corner. Some of the other features in the homes, every door, window, and cabinet in this house is connected with a piano hinge or a continuous hinge. Wright instructed Mr. Muirhead to buy 500 feet of piano hinges. And at the time in 1951, Mr. Muirhead was perplexed as to where he was going to find a supplier to provide 500 feet of piano hinges. So he wrote back to Wright with that question, and Mr. Wright gave him the name of a company called Aircraft Components out of Michigan. They made aluminum aircraft hinges. So he was able to find a supplier for the 500 feet of aluminum hinges that he needed for all the doors and windows. Then these latches looks more like what you'd see on a boat. They're kind of a boat latch. Mr. Muirhead liked these. He found them in one of his architectural catalogs. So all the doors have these little what they call lever latch hinges. And then Mr. Wright, like many of his clients, decided to design a couple pieces of furniture for the home. He was pretty intent on starting in the Usonian models. He was intent on designing furniture and built-in cabinetry. One of the things that Wright hated was to sit on the drawing board and design a house for a client, only to have the client insist upon moving their old ugly furniture from the old house into the new house. And Wright often considered that just a violation of his design. And so in the Usonian models, he started to design furniture to keep his clients from doing just that. This chair and this little hassock were designed for the house. There were supposed to be 24 of these hassocks built and designed for the house. And there were supposed to be, I think, 16 of these chairs built. Give you a little idea on the home's history and kind of where we're at. In 1953, they started raising their family in the home, even though it wasn't completely finished. It took Mr. Muirhead several years to kind of finish the house. In 1985, the house was sold to Mr. Muirhead's grandson, Charlie. Charlie bought the home and then took up the farm operation. So he was kind of the next generation of farmer. In 2001, Charlie passed away at the age of 38. He had a heart attack in his sleep. And that kind of left the home semi-vacant for about a year. And at that point in time, it had become very run down and dilapidated. The flat roof had leaked for many years, causing extensive water damage in the home. And Charlie had made some severe modifications to the home, which were not in line with Wright's original plan. In 2002, the family decided to sell the farmland. There was 550 acres total. They sold off 532 to the County Forest Preserve District, who now owns roughly 1,000 acres all the way around this house. And then in 2003, we began the renovation to replace the roof and to restore the house to a livable condition. So this was what it looked like in 2003, just to kind of give you an idea. This is the front entrance of the home right here, overgrown with lots of bushes and flowers. If you can see, the parapet wall here had started to sink. See this big sag? It had been hit by a delivery truck on the corner here, and so it had actually started to
Mike,
deflect.
I think you need to advance the screen.
I did.
We're looking at the home's history.
Okay, you should be looking at the exterior state now.
Now we are.
Okay,
Now we are.
somewhere it didn't go
It's
through.
okay.
Okay, so yeah, again, the front entrance of the home is here. And this is the parapet wall that is above the flat roof. And you notice how it's starting to sag here. This is the carport, which is a very extensive cantilever and probably the largest cantilever roof that we have in the home, but it had been hit by a delivery truck here and it had started to sag. And so we ended up having to do a lot of extensive renovation. If you see the brick walls up top, they had started to spalt and deteriorate. They needed to be retuck pointed and repaired. And a lot of this siding, Charlie had decided to paint the cypress siding brown as opposed to leaving it unfinished. And that all had to be sanded down and the brown paint removed as well. In the photo in the upper right, this is actually is the master bedroom, the outside wall of the master bedroom. And this is the kitchen complex, this brick part here. Charlie had allowed it to become very overgrown, and there was a big pool, above ground pool in the yard out here. I want you to notice the black streaks that are on the top of the kitchen wall. Notice, everybody see the black streaks. Charlie had gone up periodically with buckets of hot tar and would dump those on the roof to try to keep some of the water from leaking in. And of course, not being very careful, a lot of that tar had dripped down the brick walls, creating quite an ugly facade. So it was in quite a state of disrepair. All right, you guys see the next slide?
Not yet.
Okay, give it a minute. How about now?
No,
Not yet?
no.
My internet connection might be really slow.
Okay,
Is it there now?
it's there now.
Okay. You'll see the picture on the left with the tractor and the forks. The parapet wall, this wall that was built around the flat roof, the boards that basically attached it to the top of the brick wall were so rotted that when I reached up to grab the board to see how solid it was basically was like coffee grounds. It was so deteriorated from the water damage. I was able to pick the parapet wall straight up with the tractor. There was nothing holding it on at all. We just picked up the entire parapet structure and put it on the ground. And you can see some of the bottom right, some of the extensive damage that the water had caused, not only to the wood, but also to the brick walls. All right, let's go on to the next one. Let me know, Eileen, when that one shows up, okay?
Yes. See, we're seeing it now.
Okay. This was some of the interior damage to the home. You can see one of the bedrooms here. Look at all the water leakage that had happened over the years, causing rust stains and wood tannin stains on the brick. A lot of the cabinetry in the house is original cypress cabinetry. About the only thing I could save off it were the handles, the metal handles. But much of this ceiling was starting to rot away or already had rotted away. This is the condition of some of the pine boards and trusses in the house. You can see much of the extensive water damage and problems. Even electrical wiring that needed to be replaced. All right, so the next slide shows more of the interior damage to the ceiling and to the walls.
We're waiting for it.
Okay.
Yep. We got
So you
it.
can see a lot of the ceiling in the house, the interior ceiling was just 1/4-inch plywood, something Wright specified and to be used, but that had started to rot away and become very mold ridden. And so when you walked into the house, it smelled like mold, pretty bad state of affairs. All right, and then the next slide. You see that one yet?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Not yet. So you
Oops.
did have a lot of mold as a result of the water infiltrating, right?
Yeah, and the wood had become so soaked that mold had started to grow in many areas of the interior of the home.
How did you remove the mold?
Well, removing the rotted wood was a big part of that, but all of the interior brick had to be pressure washed and cleaned. So that got rid of the mold that was on the brick, and then in the wood, removing the wood and replacing the wood was a big part of the renovation.
So now we're on exterior renovation 2003
Yeah.
to 2005.
So in 2003, kind of August of 2003, we began what turned out to be a 2-year renovation on the home. And a lot of that, the first thing that we did was we completely took off the entire roof structure, removed all the rotted joists, replaced them, removed all the rotted cedar or cypress, excuse me, and replaced that. We repaired many of the brick chimney areas, had to laboriously clean off these black streaks of tar. That was probably one of the hardest things that we had to do. And then started to rebuild the parapet siding. And that's what you're seeing here, much of this 4-board siding. I had to order about $6,000 worth of cypress out of Florida, because cypress is not a wood from around these parts. It is a southern wood. And so I had to order it from a lumber yard in Florida. Rebuilt the trellis overhang here, and then I actually repaired the carport as well. You see this photo up here in the upper right, this brick wall. This is the wall that's right behind me, that you're looking at behind me. This is the interior and exterior brick walls of the dining room. The dining room walls had actually started to bow from all the extensive water damage and frost damage over the years. And so we had to take out the exterior wall and rebuild it after we had taken down the interior wall and rebuilt it. So there was quite an extensive masonry that had to be done just to restore the dining room. So the wall you see behind me when you're looking at me is actually a brick wall that's been completely rebuilt inside and out. And you'll notice this garage door here. This is the door to the workshop that I talked about, or what Wright had labeled as a garage. This wood is cypress. And I want you to keep in mind as we go through some of the other slides, this has not been painted. This is black. And it's black because when cypress is repeatedly introduced to water, the tannins in the wood, the resin in the wood actually starts to bleed out, and this cypress becomes very black in color. I thought these boards were all rotted, and I started to take an orbital sander to them and started sanding them down, and it turns out that they weren't rotted. It's just this black tannin actually came right off, and the good cypress wood is underneath. One of the reasons Wright chose cypress was because of its rot-resistant characteristics.
Somebody has asked if once you remove the, oh, wait, I'm sorry, I kind of lost it. Once you remove the cedar and the exterior brick wall, did you add insulation and some kind of a rain screen damage? She's saying damage plane?
We did not put any insulation in the walls. No, there was, I think originally they had put in mineral wool or some type of fiberglass. It was some type of a mineral wool. And because of the extensive water damage, all of that mineral wool had actually settled down to about a foot from the bottom. All the water had just kind of dragged it all the way down. So there wasn't really much insulation. The good thing about brick, though, and having 2 layers of brick with a 1-inch airspace between them, is that the thermal mass of brick is very good in that it doesn't radiate cold or heat at all. So just the fact that you have a double layer of brick with a 1-inch insulation or 1-inch air pocket actually keeps the house fairly moderate from the heat outside or from the cold outside. And as far as any kind of rain, anything to keep the water out, actually just caulking and making sure that the wood is kept sealed helps an awful lot. That and the flat roof. We actually put a whole new roof system on the house and actually told the roofer that we wanted it bulletproof. We didn't want to have to mess with it again for at least 50 years. And so they put on a nice roof system that to this day is still intact and holding up well. So that was the biggest part of keeping the water out, was making sure that the roof didn't leak. Do you see interior renovation screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So we pulled all the old electrical wiring out of the house. Luckily, there was conduit in most of the brick walls to allow the wires to come out pretty easily. And then we rewired the entire house with all new electrical wiring. What you're seeing on the left here is actually the dining room fireplace. This fireplace, this metal rod that you see in the photo, this was a rod that was supposed to hold up the cantilevered corner of the fireplace. This rod goes all the way up and attaches to an I-beam, a metal I-beam that comes in from the carport. That rod had rusted and broken. So this cantilevered corner of the fireplace was actually deflected about 3/4 of an inch. It was starting to sag, and there was a big crack in the brick going all the way up. So we ended up having to take the outer brick structure of the fireplace down, and unable to access this rod or replace it, we decided to build steel legs and a new framework There's another steel leg over on this side, and there's a steel leg here that holds up this corner piece, and then all the brick was redone on the outside. So you'll see that in some of the subsequent photos. I'll show you the brick. This whole fireplace had to be rebuilt. And then all the woodwork in the house, all of it had to be sanded down. You'll see the cabinets in the kitchen here, the floor to ceiling cabinetry that Mrs. Muirhead wanted. All those cabinets had to be, all the wood had to be sanded down to remove some of the black stains and problems that the water damage had caused.
Mike, did you add flashing in the brick wall to direct to the exterior any water that penetrated into the brick?
No, the common Chicago brick is a porous brick, and the masons basically said that the brick breathes. One of the things, it's not a glazed brick on the outside. So if I were to take a cup of water and throw it at the wall on the outside, a lot of it would soak right into the brick. It's like a sponge, and the brick needs to breathe. So there's no reason to vent it or to have any kind of flashing. The only place that we have one little air vent is on the front of the outside of the brick fireplace in the living room. There's an air gap that was built into that originally, and so there does need to be a vent. There was a vent put in there to help it breathe. But the brick is amazingly resilient. It actually gets wet and then it dries out over time, and so any interior moisture is vented usually to the inside, or if it's vented into the middle of the wall to the outside, it goes right through the brick onto the outside. So common Chicago brick, unfortunately, good and bad, it does breathe and vent itself. On the bad side is that in the winter time, or when it's getting close to winter, it will suck up moisture. And then when the freezing temperatures come, much of that can cause the water in the brick to expand and crack the brick apart. So there are some parts of the house where we have horizontal brick in a horizontal position where we have to actually put sealant on it to keep it from absorbing the moisture.
Ah,
That
interesting.
helps answer that question. It's kind of
Yes, thank you.
interesting. So the interior renovation continued. This is the interior of the wall that you're seeing behind me, actually. This is the wall that had to be rebuilt. So this is the interior being taken down and completely rebuilt. These joists that you see here are basically to support the roof. We actually jacked the roof up to remove the pressure from the brick wall while we actually did the renovation of the brick. And then the ceiling, we had to install all brand new 1/4-inch plywood ceilings. This is me just kind of taping the joints to make them. And this is actually my futile attempt and my ignorance. You'll see me up on a ladder here with a putty knife, putting expandable compound in here to kind of keep the joints sealed up. Silly me. The wood in this house, like the brick, actually breathes and expands and contracts. So all of this effort to try to hide the joints was futile, because these panels will expand in the summertime with the humidity. They will expand about 3/16 of an inch. So we had to actually take and make sure that when we laid these panels in, I had to cut these joints and actually cut a 3/16 inch gap in there. So in the summertime, you will very rarely notice any cracks in between these boards, but in the summertime or in the wintertime, when the air is much drier, you'll notice that the panels shrink, and so you'll see the cracks in the ceiling, regardless of this little joint compound. So that was my being educated on how to deal with this wood ceiling. And then we actually installed all brand new recessed light fixtures. There was recessed lighting in the house as part of the original design and construction. All right, let me know when that next slide comes up.
Okay, it's here.
Okay. One of the besides the roof having to be completely ripped off and repaired, one of the things that posed a real significant problem for us is the concrete flooring that was in the bedroom wing. Remember that long bedroom wing I showed you on the blueprints? Well, all of the concrete in that wing had to be removed by hand. So we ended up having to get sledgehammers and a small bobcat into this area of the bedroom wing. This shows the bedroom wing completely gutted. All the interior walls had been removed. None of those were load bearing. They were just partition walls. Those all had to be removed, and all this concrete flooring had to be repoured, working around the 2-inch steel pipes that go up and down this bedroom wing to provide the floor heat. So we gutted all of that and had a company come in that was familiar with this red concrete process. The floors are basically poured out of solid concrete, but the top coat, once the concrete is set, but the top of the concrete is still wet, Mr. Wright specified that a product called colorundum be used to provide this red coating that's on the surface of the concrete. And it has to be troweled in by hand. It's a powder, has to be sprinkled over the cement and then troweled in by hand until it's nice and hard and smooth. So it's very laborious to do these floors. And we ended up finding a company that was familiar with this process. This is the new bedroom floor poured. And after we had finished the renovation, all the brick walls had to be completely pressure washed, and all the wood had to be sanded around all the windows. So that's all been done, and the new concrete floor has been put in here.
Does the sealant that you apply on the exterior of the brick, does it actually prevent the water from penetrating into the brick?
Yes, but we don't do it in any, none of the brick walls that are in a vertical fashion are sealed. The brick has to breathe. And so you don't want to put a sealant on the outside. The only sealant that's applied is to brick that's in a horizontal position. Like there's a garden wall outside the living room that is a horizontal wall, goes up about 2.5 feet off the ground. And the bricks that are on top of that wall are laid in a horizontal position. Those have to be sealed. Otherwise they break apart with the frost damage. The vertical structure, the brick actually sheds the moisture pretty readily. And so those don't need to be sealed at all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to show you some before and after just to kind of give you a perspective. So let me know when that slide comes up.
It's here.
Okay, so this is the dining room before we started the renovation. Notice the brick walls are in pretty bad shape. The ceiling joists are rotted. A lot of the ceiling has already been rotted and removed. I am sitting about right here in this room right now with this brick wall behind me. So let's look at what it looks like afterwards. There you see the after photo. So floors have been redone, the brick walls have been relayed, and everything's been pressure washed and cleaned. All the ceiling joists, a lot of these pine boards were so rotted, we ended up having to put new ones in. And of course, the ceiling has been replaced.
Is the furniture original?
That furniture that you saw in that photo is something my wife bought for the home just to kind of complement the room. It is not what Wright originally intended for the home. He actually designed those chairs and hassocks that I showed you in one of the first photos. Those were supposed to be the dining room and living room chairs of the home. Mr. Muirhead, being 6'2", didn't like Wright's designs for the furniture. He actually ended up doing exactly what Wright hated, and that was to bring in furniture from the old house into the new house, and that's what they used. But that dining room table and chair that you saw in that previous photo was something that Sarah and I picked up to put in the home.
Okay.
This is actually the breezeway. This is a walkway that goes down, the walkway that connects the dining room and kitchen are down this end. That end of there, when you take a left turn this way, it goes into the living room. But this is this long connecting hallway. So this is all the wood having been sanded down. You can see all the sawdust. All the new ceiling panels were installed. The red floor, still the original red floor, albeit with a lot of dust on it. And then this is the after photo. Looks a little different. So all the wood cabinetry that Wright built in, all being refinished. The wood floors being waxed and sealed, and new ceiling panels and paint being put on. This ceiling is interesting. Wright specified that the ceiling should be finished with paint, but in the paint should be mixed sand fine enough to fit through a number 9 sieve. Some of you may have used a number 9 sieve. I don't know what that looks like, but I can tell you that the holes in it have to be pretty small because the sand particles in the paint, it's a very, very fine sand that's mixed in with the paint before it's brushed and rolled on. All right, this is another picture of the carport, the original one that I showed you where it was sagging, if you can see that. And then this is the after photo after we did the renovation. So we removed a lot of the overgrowth that was in front of the home and changed the way the driveway came in to the house, straightened out this entire parapet structure and put all this in the photo on the right. This is all brand new cypress. Are those up so you can see those?
Yes.
Okay. All right, on to the next one. So again, the master bedroom, the outside of the master bedroom. a couple of the modifications that Charlie had done, he had actually, this is supposed to be a door right back here where my mouse cursor is. He had actually removed the door and boarded it up and put a window air conditioner in there. The house was not air conditioned originally. And so Charlie, when he was living in it, wanted air conditioning. He put a little window air conditioner unit in there. And then this area of the master bedroom, this actually is the patio. This whole structure here is the patio to the master bedroom, which is here. He actually had boarded and walled that up and put a window in and walled up the other side of it as well. And he put a hot tub in there. So that hot tub had to be cut with a Sawzall in order to get it out. I'm not sure exactly how he got it in there, but all that had to be taken out. So this is the after photo. All the trellis work that had rotted away here has all been rebuilt here. You can't really see it necessarily in this photo, but we've taken down the walls and removed the hot tub. And the window, the door unit back here is actually the door to the back bedroom wing. The window air conditioner has been removed. And the original door, which he had in the barn, was actually reinstalled. This is the dining room over here. And these are the windows that I'm looking out as I'm talking to you right now. And currently in the interior, and it's interesting when you start to take pictures at certain times of the day in this house, there's so much pink brick and red floors that the photos actually come out looking somewhat red. So I thought it was kind of a cool effect, but this is kind of the interior. This is again, that hallway that I showed you, the breezeway, the long hallway that leads from the kitchen, which is right here, and the dining room, which is here, leads down to the master bedroom and the living room. So you can see part of the kitchen here.
How long did it take you to do this renovation?
About 2 years. Took about 2 years to finish it up. This actually is a picture of the living room. So when you walk down this hallway, the picture on the left, and I take the left going this way, I'm going to end up right here in front of this door, and then I'm going to walk down and right into the living room. So this is the living room. Master bedroom is on the other side of this wall. And you'll see the lights in the ceiling in this picture, all recessed lighting. Wright ended up designing the house so that there's a light fixture over the middle of every 4-foot square throughout the interior of the home. So wherever you see a 4-foot square, there'll be a light directly above it. There are 20 squares in this room. There are 20 lights in the ceiling. It's easy to measure in this house. Like Sarah wanted to buy this rug to go with the living room or to put in the living room. And she said, go get a tape measure. And I said, you have 4, 8, 12 feet. So it's easy to measure in this house if you just count up the squares. You don't have to get a tape measure very often. All right, and some more pictures of what the current state of the home looks like. This is the rear of the house here and here. This is the front of the house.
Wait,
So you'll see again.
we're on, here it is now.
Oh, you got it, okay.
Yes.
Forget to wait till that loads.
Yeah.
So you have the carport here in the upper right. This right here where I'm circling with my mouse is actually the workshop, and behind it is the kitchen. You have this long hallway that we showed, which leads down to the living room, which is here. This is living room, and then the bedroom wing at the other end. And like I say, 176 feet from tip to tip. It was interesting, several years ago, we took the kids out to Washington, D.C. to do the Smithsonian Museum and other sites. And there was out by the new Smithsonian that they built out a ways from the original, there's an airport out there, and they had just built the watchtower or the control tower in that airport, and you were able to go in it. They were having kind of a grand opening. And so we stopped there and we went up to see the control room and to kind of look out. There was a plaque on the wall dedicating the control tower. It was 176 feet long. So I said to the kids, you know, this is how tall the house would be if we were to set it up on its end. Just to give them kind of a perspective of how long the house is. It's as long as the control tower at the new airport out by the Smithsonian. Again, the back of the house, this is a patio area. This is the master bedroom and patio right here. This is the long breezeway. This is the dining room. So again, that wall that Charlie had put in to enclose all of this, that's all been removed. And again, same type of picture. This is the master bedroom. There's the dining room. There's the kitchen. People often, when they tour this house, they often ask me what it's like to live in a Wright home. And it's a hard question to answer because I've lived here for about 17 years. So I take things for granted, I guess, and don't really think too much about it. But a couple of things that basically are unusual about this house in terms of what most construction has. There are 17 doors and 98 windows in this house. So to give you kind of a perspective for those of you that have counted up the doors and windows in your own home, that's a lot. And when we did the renovation and we had to get an inspection and a clearance by the fire marshal came in here and said, you need to put up lighted exit signs so that people know where the exits are. I said, there are 17 doors and 98 windows in this house. So if somebody can't find their way out without having to search for a lighted exit sign, then that's going to be a really tough state because I was able to get a variance not to put 17 lighted exit signs in the house, which was good. The ceilings in this house are only 6 feet 9 inches tall. So it is a low, all of the rooms in the house, except for the living room and the kitchen, have low ceilings. So think about what your own ceiling is in your own home. Mine are 6 feet 9 inches. That's it. I don't even have a 7-foot ceiling. So to put a lighted exit sign at each door entry or exit, it would almost have to bump my head getting out the door. All of that means that we have a very good connection to the outside. It doesn't matter what room you're in the house, you always have a wonderful view of the outside. And that was part of Wright's purpose with the Usonian model, was to make you feel always connected to the outside. The way he versed it was he wanted his homes to bring the outside in. And that's pretty much what this home does. Keep in mind, as I stated before, we have no attic, we have no basement, we have no garage, which basically means that I have little to no storage space in this house. I have some cabinetry and closets on the inside of the house, and that's pretty much it. So when you think about all the stuff that you have in your attic, basement, or garage, I don't have those areas, so I have to live more what they call minimalistic. Sarah oftentimes will be out shopping and she'll want to buy something, and I'll say, okay, where are we going to put it? Because there's a general lack of storage space in this house. So we don't have a lot of stuff. And it's one of the things that a lot of people, when they visit us, they say, where's all your stuff? I don't have a lot of stuff because I don't have any place to put it. We oftentimes discover what we call architectural nuances in the home on a regular basis. Even though I've lived here for 17 years, every now and then I'm surprised by how the light comes in and plays with this house. This hallway that you're seeing on the bottom left here is actually the bedroom hallway. The bedrooms are off to the left through these doors. You'll see how the light comes in through these little windows. I was walking into the house one day a few years ago. I'm normally outside doing all the farm work and mowing the lawn, gardening, and doing all the other stuff that the outside of the home requires. And I don't often come into the house in the middle of the day. I happened to come in at about 2:30 in the afternoon one summer, and I noticed the light was coming in through these little square windows in the hallway, and they were forming perfect light squares on the walls going down. And it looked really cool because I had never seen that before. I guess you had to be there at the right time and to see how the light came in and formed these perfect window light squares along the hallway. And they were lined up perfectly with these little light switches that are on the hallway. You see them down there. It looked actually really kind of neat. And so those little architectural nuances and how light comes into the house is actually, we're surprised every now and then by things that we discover. Let me see a picture of the dog here. This is our corgi, and it is, I oftentimes get commented about this is a really pet-friendly house because one, it has heated concrete floors. So oftentimes you will see a cat sprawled out on the floor, basking in the heat, and the dog as well. We have floor-to-ceiling windows, so it allows short dogs like the corgi to be able to look out with little to no problem. She can see pretty much everything around the property as she ventures from room to room. She's able to look out through all of the windows because the panes of glass start 9 inches from the floor. So And then there is an upper level loft space right here, this little, in the workshop, you have these clerestory windows and you have this little ledge, and our cat loves and has made this upper level her own little apartment complex. So she is able to jump up onto that, and she has kind of made this upper level space kind of her own. And it also allows her to get away from the dog. And that's about it. I'm happy to take whatever questions you folks have. I know it's kind of hard to get a perspective of this house just from a slideshow, but hopefully I've given you a good idea, at least, of what the farmhouse is. And we're happy to have you here to visit. We are currently in a closed state because of the COVID thing, but I have a family that's fairly nervous about going back to taking in guests, especially bus tours of people who are coming here while we're still living here. But I'm slowly working on them, and I hope that around the 1st to middle of September, we'll be able to open up again for tours.
So we do have some questions, Mike, and so are you still running a B&B? So after COVID, are you still running it as a B&B?
No, we actually stopped the bed and breakfast in 2012. And again, another calamity of actually living in the house and trying to show it to the public as well. When we finished the renovation in December of 2005, we opened up immediately as a bed and breakfast, and we took guests for about 7 years, overnight guests. And actually it was quite fun. I met a lot of interesting people, and I thought, who are these crazy people that want to spend a night in a Frank Lloyd Wright house? Who are these people? And got to know some of our clients really well, and it's interesting. And we actually enjoyed it. But the 2 children at the time, who were ages 5 and 11, did not enjoy it at all. They didn't like having guests here every night. They didn't like having to put their toys away and clean up their rooms and be quiet. And with guests here every night, it actually got a lot busier, I think, than we thought that it was going to. I didn't realize there was that much interest in people wanting to stay overnight in a Wright house. And when in 2012, about a year before we shut down and stopped the bed and breakfast, our wait list was 1.5 years. So we were booked solid for 1.5 years out. And it's hard to plan your life, and because you don't know what's going to happen, and 1.5 years out, and then handle and manage reservations while you're living in the home. So it got to be a little bit too difficult for us to continue to balance that. And so we stopped the bed and breakfast in 2012, but we continued to stay open for tours up until COVID.
Okay, so I have a question. Was this a labor of love? Are you an architect, or are you a builder, or like, how did you? I mean, you undertook a 2-year renovation, and a house that I assume you must have lived in at some point in the house, and you must have had to have moved out to do such extensive renovation.
Well, Sarah grew up this was her grandparents' home. She grew up in a house just south of here, just across the road, basically, that we're on. And the family farmed the acreage around both homesteads for years and years. So when we graduated from college, Sarah and I moved up to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and lived there for 20 years. And the only reason we came back to Illinois was because Sarah's brother passed away. And there was nobody really left to tend to the farm. And this house was still in the family's possession. And there was a big discussion on what to do with it. Literally, it would have been a lot easier to take a bulldozer to it than it would have been to renovate it. Mm-hmm. We started the renovation, and no, I'm not an architect. I have no construction background. I was a science teacher. So, go figure. I knew very little to nothing about Wright or his architecture. I knew of this house and had been in it a couple of times, but I really had little to no interest in it from an architectural perspective. It wasn't until we started ripping the house apart and I started learning about the history and the family's interactions with this house and their love of it that I actually kind of became a fan of it. And I started to do more research on Wright and his architecture and just kind of learn slowly, the history of this home and Wright's works. And it did become a labor of love. I actually got very much into restoring the house and continue to work to maintain it and to do restoration on it. as we move forward. So yeah, it became a labor of love, and it's an interesting house, and it's an interesting history. One of the things that Sarah and I do periodically, much to the chagrin of the kids, is whenever we go on vacation, we'll seek out a Wright house locally and try to visit it if we can, if it's open to the public. And the kids go, "Oh God, not another Wright house that we have to go look at." But it's interesting that many of the homes that are still standing, there's little to no history on them. And so I think we're very fortunate that we have all of the history on this house, pretty much everything to, you know, this tree that you see in the middle of the yard, to this tree here, when it was planted, who planted it, why it was planted, pretty much everything about the property. We have some good information on. So if that answers your question in a long roundabout way.
Yeah. How much acreage do you have now? And do you still have the pond? It's charming.
We still have the pond. We don't own it, however. That portion of the property was sold to the Forest Preserve District as part of the original sale of the 532 acres. This house sits on about 2.5 acres, and then I have another 10 acres around it that I own, including some of the original farm fields. And we use, in the summertime now, and I have been for the last 10 years now, I grow fruits and vegetables and sell them at one of the local farm markets. And as of the last 3 or 4 years, I have a gentleman locally that wanted me to start growing hot peppers. He makes hot pepper sauce in a series of sauces. So we grow a lot of hot peppers for him now. So I use the farmland, what's left of the farmland. I have about 3.5 to 4 acres of farmland that I use to grow fruits and vegetables and hot peppers and other things. So that keeps me busy.
Eileen, I had put in a couple of chats, but I don't know if you got them. It was about if this is the only Usonian house that's still standing, because I had seen a Usonian house that was put together in Scottsdale, Arizona for an exhibit on Frank Lloyd Wright, but it was a lot smaller than this. And I understand that his original Usonian houses were to be very compact. So this one seems a lot larger. Are you aware of any other Usonian houses that were built?
There are quite a few Usonian houses that are still in existence. Most of them are my understanding, are private structures, but there are many that are public structures that you can go into. One of them that's close to us in Rockford is the Laurent House, the Phyllis and Kenneth Laurent House. That is open for tours as well. And it's a very similar house to this, albeit smaller. Most of the Usonian designs are about 2,000 square feet, roughly, give or take. So they were smaller. The only reason that this one is so big is because the Muirheads had 5 children and they wanted a bedroom for each. So this bedroom wing that you see on the left of the photo, this whole expanse was nothing but bedroom space for the children. So your typical Usonian model was much more compact, usually only had 2 or 3 bedrooms, yes. But the Laurent House in Rockford is probably one of the closest. There is the Lloyd Lewis House in Libertyville is another Usonian model. It's a private home. There are a number of Usonians around the area that you can, if you look up in one of the guides.
We're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, some of us.
Albuquerque, okay. Well,
yeah, so I've been to Taliesin West. I grew up in Scottsdale. And there are still, I think, 1 or 2 houses, not Usonian, but Frank Lloyd Wright houses there. But I'm not aware of too many other ones out here, out west.
In New Mexico, yeah, you might be a little bit hard pressed to find. If you are familiar with William Allen Storer, he was one of the first authors to put together a comprehensive guide to all of Wright's structures. Everything that he designed, whether it was built or unbuilt, is in that compendium. And Storer has updated that a few times over the years. I think he's on his 3rd or 4th edition. But if you go to the library, if you look up the guide, his Storer's guide, you can see every one of the homes, and you can find out them by state as well. So if you look in New Mexico, you can find out what Usonians are near you. They'll all be there. So it's actually a nice little, I think some of the original Wright homeowners didn't like it when Storer put out his original compendium, because it gave the addresses to all the people who now wanted to see them. So all of a sudden homeowners had people driving down their driveways looking at their house. They weren't happy about it.
Mike, you mentioned a staircase at one point. Where did it lead to? And the question is, did you add any bathrooms in the bedroom wing when you did the renovation?
We did. The original, this little section that you see right here, if you can see my mouse cursor kind of going around, this is actually the children's bathroom. This is at the one end of the children's bedroom wing. This was the original bathroom that was to be shared by all of the children. And so they had 5 bedrooms with 1 bathroom. When we did the renovation and we had to pour the concrete floor in this entire wing, we ended up putting in 2 new bathrooms. And the reason for that was because we, at the time, were anticipating and planning to open it as a bed and breakfast. I didn't want to have 5 sets of guests all having to stand in line to wait to use 1 bathroom. So in order to make it more functional as a bed and breakfast, we did, as part of the renovation, and we had the opportunity because we had to remove the floor, we put in 2 additional bedroom or bathrooms and built them the same way as the original kids' bathroom. So it became, now you have 3 bedrooms down this wing instead of 5. The other 2 bedrooms were made into bathrooms. So you have 3 bedrooms and you have 2 bathrooms down here and then 1 still for the original kids' bathroom. And then the master bedroom on the back side of the house still has its own original bathroom. Did that answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have a question. Why did Frank Lloyd Wright feel that the area near the pond was not as desirable? He loved the outdoors, so it amazes me that he didn't put it, frankly, where the Muirheads wanted it, and expected it to go. And it seems counterintuitive to me.
Yeah, we don't have a solid answer to that question. I know that one of the things that the Muirheads wrote in the original letter was that we are very close to the railroad track. If I go back to, let me see if I can go back here. It might take a while to load, but let me see if I can go back to the picture of the aerial photo of the property. See if I no, there it is. All right, so let me know when that comes up. So that's the photo of the property, and like I said, that circle there, that's where the thought would be the best place for the house.
Yeah.
And of course, these trees weren't here at the time, but at that time. But Wright positioned the house over here, and if you notice that there's a railroad track that goes right here along the bottom of the picture, we are very close to that. I think from the track to the end of the house is about 200 feet. So we are very close to the railroad. And one of the things that the Muirheads wrote in the original letter was that they enjoyed the trains very much. They enjoyed watching them. And keep in mind, back in 1948, the trains consisted mostly of boxcars or flatbed containers. And many times you could see what the train was hauling. So if it was grain or if it was machinery or lumber or whatever, so they enjoyed watching the trains. And I think a lot of times it was, Farmer Johnson down the road had ordered a couple of new tractors. Well, here they come on the train, so they could see, and it was kind of an interesting thing to watch the trains. The trains would actually stop in Plato Center, which is the little town right that we're close to. And the cars would be backed up along this railroad track as they were unloading in Plato Center. And so the Muirheads could actually stop and see. And every now and then a hobo or somebody who is riding the train would jump off and come down and eat apples off the apple tree. It was a common occurrence, I guess, back in the day. And so the train was, I guess, sort of an entertainment and more of a colorful than it is now. Now they just speed by with tanks of ethanol and you don't really see a whole lot. So I think Wright probably positioned the house to take advantage of the railroad track. Well, one, it was closer, they could view the trains, and Wright positioned the house on this angle to take advantage of the sun. If you'll notice, let me see if I can go back up here to the outside picture of the home. You'll notice that there's a large 4-foot overhang on the front of the house. This is all a 4-foot overhang all the way around, which keeps the hot summer sun, which is higher in the sky, keeps that from shining directly into the windows of the house. But the lower winter sun actually the overhang does allow the winter sun to come in and heat the home. So actually Wright did a nice job of positioning the house in a southeast face and taking advantage of these big 4-foot overhangs. So that was, I think, one of the other reasons that he positioned it where it is. Why exactly he chose to put it in the apple orchard, nobody really knows. It was just where he thought it was going to best be positioned.
So, Mike, this is your home, but we know that renovation of Frank Lloyd Wright houses are extremely costly. We just watched a video about Mason City and the Park Inn, which is like the only existing hotel of the 6, that have been renovated and still exists.
Mhm.
And so were you able to get funding from like arts, from some arts foundations or state funding? I mean,
No, there really wasn't any funding available at the time that we were doing the renovation. The sale of the farmland to the Forest Preserve District provided some of the cash that we needed to do the renovation. And so some of the money from the sale of the farmland was rolled back into to do the renovation of the house. It was costly. Originally, to build this house, it was about $50,000 to $55,000 in 1951. It cost us about $750,000 to renovate it. So it was a costly. Like I say, it would have been a lot easier just to bulldoze it, be done with it. But the family was adamant about saving it and restoring it. So
we're so thankful that you didn't bulldoze it. Unfortunately, that was the choice that other people made about these properties, and they're lost.
yeah, they're gone. Yeah,
So,
the one thing that is a detriment to most of these houses is that they were built on a very nice piece of property. And so developers come in and they go, I really like the property, but I don't like the house. And so they take the house down and they build something else in its place. And so, yeah, many of his structures have been lost for that reason. Yeah.
so when you reopen, when can people come and see you? Or do you have a website? And
You do. If you go to
Yeah.
muirheadfarmhouse.com, you can, right now I have on the front page to say that we're closed. We're going to try to open up sometime in September. I think 2 bus tours already scheduled for October, but for private tours and public tours, individual tours, we'll probably try to open sometime mid-September. And there is a calendar on there that you can click off of our main page when we're back open, and then you can see the tour dates from the calendar.
wonderful. Thank you so much. This was, I learned so much. And once again, I can't wait to get on the road and be able to see these kinds of spaces for ourselves. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.